college? Is college something that you look at and you look and you go, well, if I want to do the career I want to do, I'm going to have to go through college? Is college one of the things that you look at and you go, college is the opportunity for me to determine what I want my economic future to look like? Is college something you look at and you go, it's just financially or academically, it's just not going to happen for me? Or is college one of the things you look at and you go, I'm going to meet my future partners in career and the people that I want to make networks with that are going to take me places I want to go? You see, the reality of it is all of us have a different view of what college is and what college is like. I want to shift and let's talk about worship for a minute. Worship is one of those things that is expressed in a wide range of ways by a wide variety of people, and it's affected by a lot of different circumstances. Sometimes worship is affected by where we're at when we're worshiping. Sometimes it's affected by who or what we're worshiping. Sometimes it's affected by our theology of God or worship. And sometimes it's just about our own personal comfort zone, what we're comfortable doing and what we're not comfortable doing. I find it interesting today, all the different ways that people worship that sometimes we realize and sometimes we may not have thought about. But when you think about it, when you go to a sporting event, there are people there that are worshiping some of the athletes. When you go to a movie, there are people there that are worshiping some of the actors and the celebrities involved in that. Whenever we watch the award ceremonies in Hollywood, that whole red carpet experience and all the photographers and the cameras, that's a form of worship. It may not be the way I worship. It may not be the way you worship, but it is a way that people are worshiping. The other thing that plays into that is even where we're at. Like last year, I got the privilege of being at Snow Feast and watching about 300 high school students from around the state gather over here in the local high school, and there was a times of worship. And here's the interesting thing. In that experience and in that environment, what I saw was that they would get up to worship, they would leave their seats and get as close to the stage as they could to worship. And then they were singing, they were shouting, they were jumping up and down. I had to stop and take oxygen just watching them. But it was beautiful because you could see the joy in their heart. You could see the energy. You could see the passion. You could see the emotion with which they were worshiping God. It wasn't frivolous. It wasn't just playful. It wasn't careless. It was powerful. Because everything within them was expressing adoration toward God. At sporting events, people will paint themselves up with team colors, and some of the guys will go without shirts and put a letter on their chest and tell them, hear me, I'm not recommending this. Okay, I'm not asking you to show up that way next week. But those are expressions of worship and it's adoration. If you were to ever go to a worship service in Africa, you would see a radically different experience. There would be a lot of dancing. There would be a lot of chanting. There would be beads worn in a specific way with a specific meaning and intention behind that. You would watch the entire village would know the role that they play in the worship experience for everyone else within the village. Why? Because that's the way they worship. So let me ask you, what is your view of worship? Is your view of worship something that is an exuberant expression of just how you feel about God? Is your view of worship something that should be quiet and proper? Is it something that should be reverent? Or is it something that should be celebratory? Is it something that best experienced or expressed when we're sitting down? Or when we're standing? Or when our hands are in the air? Or when we're clapping? Or should we, under no circumstances, clap at all? You see, there's a lot of different views of how people feel comfortable worshiping and how people feel, what people feel is right or wrong about worshiping. One of the things that's clear is that worship is a recognition of the goodness of God in our lives. So one of the things that I want to say is whatever your view of worship is, one of the ways that we see it really embraced heavily goodness in our life. I'm just taking a moment and recognizing that. So, let's look at what did the Bible say about worship? Did the Bible tell us there's the right way to worship? Did the Bible tell us when we're supposed to worship, how we're supposed to worship? Or did the Bible have examples of worship? So we're going to go through several examples in the Bible of worship. We're not going to be able to cover every single example, so you may have something that just popped into your mind, and we may or may not get to that example, but we'll get to enough examples to be able to demonstrate, communicate that worship is more than just the singing of songs. And I think for most of us, the first image in our mind when we say, what is worship, we think of it in terms of singing. Singing is definitely an aspect of worship, but worship is so much bigger than that. So the first place we want to look this morning is in Psalm chapter 95, verses 1 through 7. And just listen as we read this in terms of all the different postures and all of the different attitudes of the heart that are listed just in this one passage. Come and let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with music and song. For the Lord is the great God, the great King above all gods. In his hands are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hand formed the dry land. Come, let us bow down and worship and kneel before the Lord our Maker. He is our God, and yes, we are the people of his pastures, the flock under his care. In that passage, there were so many different postures that were talked about, so many different expressions, and yet all of that contained in that one description of worship. Why? Because worship is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. In the same way, your worship might look different than my worship. Even my worship today might look different than what my worship looked like 20 years ago. But one of the things that I mentioned a minute ago that is clearly involved in worship is a recognition of God's goodness. So I want to ask you to grab the card from the back of the sheet in front of you that just talks about the goodness of God. So go ahead and pull this out of the seat back in front of you. And I'm going to just kind of invite you over the next couple of minutes to just take some time and just list what are different ways that God is showing his goodness in your life. And just so that you know, this will probably be your two most favorite moments about the message. Because I'm going to stop talking for 2 minutes while you just start writing lists. What are things that you see, where are the places that you see God's goodness in your life? Go ahead and take a couple minutes to do that. hopefully just brings up a joy within you that just kind of wells up. You and I can spend every day writing lists of God's goodness, but oftentimes we just don't take the time to just stop and pause and ask, what God doing in my life? How is He blessing me? How is He being good to me? So I just want to give you the opportunity to do that. I want to let you know this will be used again later in our time of singing together. On the evening of Jesus' resurrection, there's a rather interesting exchange that took place. So on that evening, Jesus appeared before His disciples, and all of a sudden they're just blown away like, whoa, wait a minute. We know you were crucified. We know you were put in the tomb. They did not expect to see Him at all. They're just kind of just stunned. Wow. And there was also an awareness that, this whole time we thought you were going to be a king on a throne, and oh my goodness, you are way more than that. And so Thomas, one of the disciples, wasn't there when this whole experience took place and when they got to see Jesus. And so later, when Thomas comes back, they begin to tell him, it was so cool, you should have been here, you missed out. We just saw Jesus alive again in the flesh. And Thomas desperately wanted to believe them. And yet he said, I'm just not there. And so Thomas makes a very famous statement. He said this, unless I see the nail marks in His hands and put my fingers where the nails were and put my hand into His side, I will not believe. A week later, Jesus reappeared in front of the disciples when Thomas is in the room, and here's what takes place. In John chapter 20, verse 27 and 28. Then He, Jesus, said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hand. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. And Thomas said to Him, my Lord and my God. That's a moment of just stunned worship. That's a moment where Thomas didn't see it coming. Thomas didn't express it. He didn't get up and put on his Sunday best clothes to get ready for worship. He was just confronted with Jesus alive in the flesh after His death in front of him. And you can almost hear him just out of breath. My Lord God. That is worship. Another form of worship we're going to look at is Romans chapter 12, verse 1. And here's what it says. Wait, let me back up for a minute. I forgot to defend myself. So for every Thomas out there, if you know any Thomases in your life, I want to clear something up. Thomas was a doubter for a week, but he was a worshiper for a lifetime. Okay, so quit giving me flack and calling me doubting. All right, Romans chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, and if you have God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Have you ever thought about that? The fact that you're called to worship God 24/7. You're not called to worship God on a Sunday morning. You're called to worship God with every aspect of your life. The way you interact with people is an act of worship, good or bad, in front of God. The way you serve people when they have a need, when you look at somebody who's hurting, when you see somebody making really poor choices and you respond to that, all of those are opportunity for you and I to express worship to God by the way we respond in those situations. So I want to challenge you to think about the fact that you and I are called to be worshipers 168 hours a week, not 1 hour a week. Now with that in mind, would that change the way you spend some of your 168 hours? Maybe it's something that's not bad, it's not something that's sinful, but would I want to trade that hour of doing this thing and miss out on another hour where I could be worshiping God by what I'm doing, by what I'm thinking, by the way I'm expressing myself, by the way I'm living and interacting with other people? So it's not necessarily that this is bad or sinful, it's just man, what a waste of time compared to an opportunity to be living my life in a way that is expressing to God, you are my number one priority in life. Every hour of every day, you're the most important thing in my life. In John chapter 12, verse 12 to 13, we see a really unique expression of worship. This is the time when Jesus is entering the city of Jerusalem, and the crowds have been following him. They've been listening to his teaching. They've been watching him heal people. They've been watching him cast out demons. And they're picking up on this idea that Jesus is a king. But in their mind, they still think he's going to be a king in Jerusalem. They think he's going to come in and be a powerful king, get rid of the Romans so we no longer under somebody else's rule. And man, if this guy can heal people, if he can cast out demons, imagine what we're going to be like as a nation when he's our king. And so at this point, they see him coming into Jerusalem the week before his death. And here's what happened. The story as it unfolds in John chapter 12, verse 12 and 13. The next day, the great crowd had come for the festival, heard that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. They took palm branches and they went out to meet him, shouting, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Blessed is the King of Israel! There was an excitement, there was a joy, like finally, after centuries of nation after nation wiping us out and dominating us, finally, here comes the king who's going to change everything. That was definitely a moment of worship. Quite honestly, it was a moment of worship of Jesus without even fully understanding who Jesus was. They had this big of a view of who Jesus was when Jesus was so much more than that. But with their understanding in the moment, they were giving the greatest expression of worship that they could with palm branches and was shouting out and claiming, he's the King of Israel. Another example is found in Philippians chapter 2, verses 9 through 11. It reads like this. Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is the Lord to the glory of the Father. What an awesome, powerful day that's going to be. I read a book one time, I love the book. It's Christianity for Those Who Aren't Christians Yet. And the reason I love that title is on that day when Jesus comes back, everybody's a believer. What a beautiful day that's going to be. To just watch some people who have spent a lifetime adoring him get to look him in the face and worship him in his physical presence like never before. And to watch other people who have doubted his existence or haven't believed in him to have that stunning moment that Thomas had. And just go, oh my, you are God. You are the Lord. I have been so wrong. That's going to be a beautiful day. That's going to be a powerful moment. That's going to be an incredible expression of worship. I want to share one more example with you from the Bible. It's from a long story, but I need to clarify something before I tell you the story. Okay? There's a couple of aspects of this that I am not going to ask you to repeat in public. Okay? And so here's what I need you to do, just so that we're all clear on this. I need you to turn to the person sitting next to you and say, I don't have to repeat all of this.
Don't have to repeat all of this. Yeah, don't have to repeat.
That may not mean a whole lot to you, but I need to keep my job. Okay, so we just needed to set that up. Now, this is going to be a long story here, so I want to kind of fast forward to the end of the story, because that's the part that is really germane to talking about worship. But here's the story. The bigger context of it, the Ark of the Covenant, which had been in the tabernacle, and it had the Ten Commandments in it, and it had a jar of manna in it to remember that God provided for them every single day while they were in the wilderness. And it was in the tabernacle, it was in the Holy of Holies, and it was in that place that God was dwelling among his people. So it was with an incredible reverence and respect and awe of the Ark of the Covenant. And so they began to move it toward Jerusalem. When Jerusalem, with the capital, when Jerusalem is going to be where the temple would be built, it wasn't built yet. But as they began to move it, there was a time where the oxen that were pulling it stumbled and it started to move, and a man Uzzah reached out and touched it, and he died instantly. So everybody just kind of stepped back and said, okay, we're done moving this for right now. And so it sat at the home of a man named Obed-Edom. And so that's where we're going to pick the story up in 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 12 through 16. Now, King David was told, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God. In other words, when God's presence is somewhere, blessings flow. When God's presence is in your life, there are just blessings that come into your life. Not because you did something, not because you deserve it, but because God's presence just flows through good things. So the ark of God. So David went to bring up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. And when those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. And then wearing a linen ephod. Here's the part I warned you about. What he's referring to here is he was just wearing nothing but his undergarments. Okay, that's the part you don't have to repeat in public, okay? All right. Well, David was dancing before the Lord with all of his might while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets as the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David. Michal, the daughter of Saul, watched from a window, and when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. Why? Why? Why did Michal feel like she needed to evaluate David's worship? Why did she feel like she was the judge of how David was worshiping? He's the king of the land. What gives her the right to think that she should be evaluating his worship? Interesting thing in this. Oftentimes, we want to focus on other people around us and how they're worshiping. And whenever I'm watching you worship, I have to take my eyes off God to do that. So if I'm questioning whether you should be standing or sitting or raising your hands or bowing your head or folding your hands in your lap or whatever, I'm not worshiping God in that moment. I'm thinking about you. So let's go on and see how the rest of this plays out. It backs up and into the end of it, the story is in 2 Samuel chapter 8, verses 20 through 23. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, well, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, and as any vulgar fellow would. And David said to Michal, it was before the Lord who chose me, rather than your father or anyone from his house whom he appointed ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate the Lord. I will become even more undignified than that. I will be humiliated in the eyes of people, but by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor. And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. There's an interesting thing here that I don't want you to miss. The time that Michal spent judging and criticizing David for the way he was worshiping God meant that she was not worshiping God. She was not celebrating the return of the Ark of the Covenant, or the coming of the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. She was missing out on worshiping God because she was too busy criticizing someone else. You see, here's why that's important. It's not possible to worship God and criticize others simultaneously. So anytime we spend time criticizing and judging others for the way they worship or live out their life, that means we chose to take that time away from being a gift of worship to God, and instead we use it to look negatively upon His children. Apparently it mattered enough to God that He kept her from having children her entire life. So one of the things that I wanted to really think about is whether you're most comfortable worshiping reverently, or quietly, or by yourself, or sitting outside looking at creation, or whether you love a worship that is expressive and energized and hands in the air. That's between you and God. The thing that matters is, what does your expression of worship do for your heart? Here's what I mean by that. There are times where my worship is on my knees. There are times where my worship, there's not even any words in it. I'm just thinking or listening. There are times where my worship looked like some of those high schoolers over at Snowfeast. But it depends on what's going on in my heart, what's going on in my relationship with God, and is my entire body, along with my voice and my heart, worshiping God? Or am I keeping part of my worship back? So the thing I really want to teach and encourage us is worship can take a lot of different forms. But the thing that matters is, what does your worship before God look like? Not what does anybody else's worship before God look like. We're going to have, in just a moment, we're going to have an extended time of worship. And I'll be honest, this is partly from my prejudice or my bias. I'm hoping somewhere in that worship time that your voice gets a little dry and you need to drink water, or there's a time where you're just almost a little bit out of breath because you're worshiping with that kind of enthusiasm and that kind of an excitement. We do that at football games. And so I would love for God to receive that kind of worship from us. The other thing I want to let you know is that there will come a time, and you will choose the time, when you choose to take communion. Everybody was given communion on the way in, and here's what we want to do. We want to give you the freedom to say, as you're singing, there will be a song, there'll be a time, there'll be a place in that expression where you just go, this is the moment where I want to stop and pause and say thank you to Jesus for dying on the cross for my sins. So you choose when that moment is for you, and then you can open up that communion and partake of it. You can do it while you're standing. You can choose to sit down. It doesn't matter because it's between you and God in that moment. Let me pray, and then we'll sing together. Heavenly Father, thank you for the way that you're so worthy of worship. God, we could worship you with every breath, and we wouldn't run out of things to be thankful for. God, you are so incredibly good with us. There should be times where we just have that stunned moment. There should be times where there's just an exuberation and a dance and a joy. And God, there should be times where we're just sitting in awe of you. So Lord, we pray that all of these times are times that glorify you and honor you.